welcome to the book launch for Little Horror with author Daniel Peake, which you should see on, I don't know which side it's going to be, on one of the sides. We're so excited that you're here, and it's not going to pick up the cover, is it? We're so excited that you're here today. My name is Karen Bultia. I'm one of the sales and marketing officers at Firefly Press. And please remember, this is a YouTube premiere launch, so it means that you can ask questions in the chat on the side, and Daniel will be there live to answer all your burning questions. So, hi, Daniel. Hello.
Hello. Hi.
Exciting times.
Yeah. I'm very, very excited. It's a very big day for me, this.
Okay. Cool. So as a little introduction, can you tell us a bit about yourself as a writer and about your career so far?
Sure. Well, so I've been a writer for about 20 years now, but this is the first time I've written a book. Everything that I've written before now has been TV for children and for adults. It's all been comedy. Some people might dispute that, but technically it's all been comedy. So I won't go through it all, but I suppose the three that people might have heard of, the three most recent ones are Lee Mack's sitcom Not Going Out. I write that with Lee, done about 50 or 60 episodes of that with him, I think. I've been on the writing team for Horrible Histories for a few years, so I've done a few of those. And I write a show called Code 404 with Daniel Mays and Stephen Graham and Anna Maxwell Martin in it, which is it's a kind of a police science fiction comedy show.
Did you get your first screen time on that recently, or did I kind of miss that?
I did. That's very observant. That's very observant. They needed some. There was a scene where some bad guys had been, arrested. They needed some mugshots for some kind of likely looking criminals.
You're like, yo.
Yeah, and said, well, I didn't even volunteer. I think that someone just thought I was the right person for the job. So I was mugshot number 2. I was very briefly on screen in the second episode. So briefly that my wife, who had watched it twice before, and I still had to point out that it had been me.
Well, I mean, I thought we may as well mention that.
Yeah, no, thanks very much. It was a big moment for me, that.
So after like a lot of screenwriting projects, how did Little Horror come about?
Well, it came about from a very specific incident that happened actually a long time ago, when my eldest daughter was a baby, and the situation was that she'd been out to the shops with my wife that morning. She'd come back. I was changing the baby's nappy. She was less than 6 months old at the time, and I was just chatting away to her as I changed her and saying, "Oh, well, what have you been up to today? Have you been to the shops with mummy? Where have you been?" And the baby turned and looked me very directly in the eye and said, "Argos." And I called my wife into the room. Came. Where have you been? What's happened this morning? She said, "We've been shopping. Where have you been?" She said, "Oh, we went to Next and I don't know, Mother Care." I said, "Where else?" And she said, "We went to Argos." And I said, "Well, I know because the baby just said Argos." She didn't believe me. We tried to make the baby say Argos again. She didn't. She turned away, and
it's one of those moments, isn't it? If you want it to happen, it's never going to happen again. It's like,
we spent the next 18 months probably just kind of over it, going Argos. She never said it again, and that's the end of that story. But that's what kind of made me think, well, what if there was a baby, or what if all babies, kind of just were more intelligent than they told you, and there was other stuff going on there. So that gave me the idea for the story. Not the full idea, because there's loads of stories about kind of cute babies and doing funny things. I thought, well, what if you started with that kind of a starting point, and then wrote a thriller, wrote basically a James Bond story about what might happen to a character like that. So that's where it all came from, and that wasn't a TV idea really. And I don't feel like it's a very cute story. I mean, hopefully it's a funny story and it's a nice story, but I don't think it's cute. So I thought it had to be a book really. And so I turned it into, it took me a long time because that baby is now 12 years old and in year 8, but it eventually became a book.
Needs to percolate in the head.
That's right.
So what was kind of the process like, and were there things that were very different when you were writing? Did you learn new things about writing? Like, because it's a completely new medium, isn't it, for you?
Yes, it is. I mean, I think when I started off, I was kind of naive and arrogant enough to think it was the same, really. And it was only when I actually started to write the book that I realized it's a completely different process. Of course, when you write a script, very few people read it. You know, scripts aren't written to be read. They're written to be handed over to other professionals who you know, inhabit and develop those characters, and a director will decide how it should look, and designers will have their impact on it, and an editor will work out what the pace of it is, and a composer will come in. And by that time, you know, your book is your script is just the thing that is just the recipe, really.
Yeah.
Whereas a book, you've still got an editor, of course, had a very good editor, and you've still got a designer, a cover designer. But unless it's a picture book, the words are all there is. And saying that now, that feels very obvious. That is very obvious, but I had to learn it.
So what was the most fun about writing Little Horror for you?
But the same thing, really. The same thing is that you are in charge of everything. And there are a lot of constraints to writing TV. You've got to fit it all into 23 minutes or 28 minutes. The shows that I wrote, you do anyway. And you have to think about which actors are available on which day, and whether you can afford to go to a certain location. Whereas in this, if you want to have, if you want to have a 2-year-old girl drive down the motorway on a mobility scooter, so you just do it and it's done.
Yeah.
So it was really enjoyable. I don't think I've had as much fun writing anything as I did writing this.
So did that also mean the lack of constraints, that you kind of went further and kind of went to places that you didn't expect?
No. So I'm going to contradict myself now. Because I think, although there weren't constraints, I kind of like constraints. I probably put some constraints back on it. And I also, probably as a result of having to write things for 28-minute TV shows, I'm quite keen on planning. I know a lot of people would say the absolute opposite of this, that when you set out to write, you have an idea, you have a spark, a character, and off you go and see where it takes you, which is great, but that's not my style. My style is to plan everything.
You're very much a planner then.
Yeah, I'm a real planner. And then you can go off the rails a little bit. You can get halfway through and realize that the character wants to go somewhere that you didn't intend, and that happens, and it's really good fun when that happens. But no, I am quite strict with things like that, and I do try and make sure everything contributes to the story, and I do try and cut out all the chaff. You don't cut out, you sift out the chaff, don't you? I can't remember what you do.
Well, you cut out words and you sift chaff. I mean, it's all the same. Yeah. So what is your favorite childhood book? Like, are there any books that have inspired you as a writer?
I don't know about that. I've got a favorite childhood book, which coincidentally is right next to me. Not that I thought you would ask that question or anything.
We have not at all spoken about this.
No, talk about planning things in advance, Karen.
No, never. Completely off the cuff.
I'll show you this book because even though it's been my favorite book for many years, I'm still not quite sure how you pronounce the title. It's called The Weird Stone of Brisingamen.
That's how it is now. That's it. We've decided.
I don't know. Which is I just had a look in the front. It's 60 years old. It was first published in 1960, which isn't when I read it. And it's a story about these two kids, brother and sister, who, to cut a long story short, get involved with a bunch of wizards and witches and goblins and stuff. It's one of those kind of adventures, and they have lots of adventures underground. No need to go into the whole story, but I'll tell you the 2 reasons I like it. The first one is that it's really scary. And I think when I first read it, when I was maybe 10 or 11, it was the first time I'd come across a book that there was no kind of reassurance that everything was going to be okay.
Okay.
The evil characters are really malevolent and nasty, and the peril that they get themselves into, it really feels like they might die at any moment, and it terrified me. And reading it again as an adult, I still think it's one of the scariest books I've ever read. And I've read some grown-up scary books as well, but this is still up there. So whether that's a recommendation or not, I don't know. It's more of a warning, I suppose. But that's the reason why it made a big impression on me. And the second reason I like it, a bit more personal, is that it's all set about 5 miles down the road from where I live, which is always nice, isn't it?
As a child, that must have been amazing. It'd be like magic and goblins and witches and wizards, like just round the corner.
Absolutely. And it's not because it's not just that the town is the same or the forest is the same, but you can go to specific. There's a bit where there's a split in the rocks, and I don't know, some wizard pops out or something. If you go there, there is this big crack in the rock is there.
Oh, that's amazing.
There's another bit where they find an inscription kind of carved into the rock, which feels totally made up. And so you go there to walk the dog, and there it is. So it feels super
so cool.
Real. It is cool. And if there's a similarity between that book and my book, which there isn't, there's no similarity really, but I probably pinched that sense of finding places that are real or that you might recognize from the everyday life and putting a different story there. So whereas in this, it's Alderley Edge and Macclesfield, in Little Horror Hits Tesco.
I mean, it's very familiar to most people, I would say.
Well, that's right. Not everybody knows Alderley Edge, but most people know
a Tesco.
Tesco.
Yeah, got on around the corner for me. It's great. Not sponsored, unfortunately. So were any of the characters inspired by real people? Are you saying that the locations are inspired by like your life and, you know, locations that everybody would be familiar with?
Yeah, so the locations are all pretty thinly based on places that I've been to in real life. And the characters are, well, obviously the Rita, who's the central character, was prompted by my daughter. But that was just because of the little party trick she did when she was a baby. I think as a character, she's perhaps based a bit more on my children now, as they are age 9 and 12, because she's not, you know, psychologically she's not a baby. So that kind of quite direct and inventive and sarcastic character is probably based on my kids. And the other I think there's a villain in the story. His name is Mr. Close. I didn't think he was based on anyone, but when it came to actually kind of writing him, I think he's the one that I identify with the most. There's a scene where he kind of outlines, like they do in Bond films, he outlines his evil plan. And I found that really easy to write and quite convincing, actually. I found myself on his side, so possibly he's based on me.
Well, there you go. I think people just have to read and then figure out whether it matches up with today.
Okay.
So, as you said, you've been writing for a long time. If you could tell your younger writing self anything, or give yourself any advice, any writing advice, what would it be?
Well, I mean, in terms of books, obviously this is the first book I've ever written, and it's only just come out, and I don't know if anybody likes it yet, so it feels a bit presumptuous to kind of offer advice on how to do it. Having said that, I will. So my advice, I would give practical advice. It's never mind like write what you know or any of that. Stay hydrated. Don't drink more than about 5 or 6 or 7 cups of black coffee a day, which is what I do, because you won't. That's not very good for productivity. Get a good quality pencil sharpener, not a plastic one, but like a good metal one, maybe even an electric one. So pencil sharpener. And and the other one is necessary is spelled with 1 C and 2 S's. Occasionally it's spelled with 1 S and 2 C's. And if you know those 3 things, then you know as much as I do about how to write. Okay.
Excellent. So I'm guessing you prefer paper to computer, or do you use a mix of the two?
I do a bit of both, actually. I tend to first draft on computer, and then I print it off, and then I scribble all over it, and then tidy it up, and so back and forwards. Yeah.
Cool. Do you have any writing heroes, people that you admire when it comes to writing, or books that you would want to recommend apart from your childhood favorite?
P.G. Woodhouse, I suppose, just because he's as far as I'm aware, he's the funniest person who ever wrote words down. Yeah, I mean, loads of, obviously hundreds and hundreds of people, but I could either go on all day, or I could just say one. I say him.
There you go. That's perfect. So we're going to move on to some quick fire questions. In the meantime, don't forget to put some. I can never remember which side is going to be. It's going to be on either side. It's going to be a chat box. Please put some questions in there for Daniel. We're going to do some quick fire questions, and then you're going to do a short reading for us.
Okay.
Exciting times. All right. Tea or coffee?
Coffee, black.
Excellent. Heroes or villains?
Well, villains, I suppose. Yeah, since I just admitted to being one.
Characters or plot?
Plot. That's a really good question.
Why? I know we're
quick
kind
fire.
of...
We've got to move on. Plot.
No. Why? Come on.
I digress. Well, they're both very important, aren't they? Obviously, you
Are
can't
you
have
saying this
one
because your
without the
editor
other.
might be watching? Is that why
Well,
you're
listen,
doing this?
I think I would rather read something with a really good story and slightly cliched, old-fashioned characters than something with very deep backstory, plot development, where character development, where nothing happens.
I mean, you need both, really, but you know.
Well, of course, you need both. I'm not saying you don't need both, but you did ask, and I'm trying to answer the question.
Favorite genre?
Fugitive novels.
Fugitive novels.
That's
That's very
niche.
specific. I like it.
Yeah.
Good. Books that make you laugh or books that make you cry?
Laugh, please. They're very easy. I cry very often at books. I don't laugh very often at them. So
okay.
I think it's
so you want to be challenged to get that laugh out.
Yeah.
Okay. The first book you can think of right now. Not your own. That would be cheating.
So I've got 2 books in front of me.
There you go. Well, there we are. We already won it.
And how about how to play the saxophone manual?
That's a book, so that counts. Are you learning the saxophone?
My daughter is learning the saxophone. I'm learning how to be serene and rise above it.
I'm sure you do fine. Cat or dog?
Dog. I have to say dog because there's one staring at me right now.
There you go, you have to.
My dog is not just a dog. My dog is looking at me. But dog, yeah.
Be embarrassed or be afraid?
Be afraid.
Okay. City or countryside?
Countryside, please.
Cake or ice cream?
Cake.
I'm sure your villain would be very disappointed right now. Just saying. There's like an ice cream van like right here. Anyway.
Oh yeah.
Letter or email?
Email, let's be honest.
And then finally, novels or scripts?
Novels.
Okay. Just for today. It's fine. Don't let anybody else who works on your scripts that you see this. It's okay. All right. Lovely. Well, thank you so much, Daniel. This has been
Thank you. I really enjoyed that.
a delight. And so we're going to go on and you're going to do a little reading for us. That's very exciting.
Okey-doke.
Thank you so much, all of you, for joining us. Don't forget to put more questions in the side, in the chat. I know I keep going on about it. And we'll listen to a nice reading from Daniel.
So I'm going to read a bit of Little Horror, which is actually the first bit that I wrote. When I first wrote the story, I thought it would be very clever if I started halfway through and kind of did lots of flashbacks and hopped around. And then I finished it, and one of the first people who read it for me said, why have you done that? It's silly. Why don't you just start at the beginning of the story? And he was right. So I went back and started at the beginning, which means that this chapter, although it's the first one that I wrote, or a version of it is the first one that I wrote, is now chapter 8. And it's a part in the story where Rita has had to escape from the family house. Someone's coming to get her. She's on the run, but she's got no one to look after her. She's got no money. She realizes she needs to get some food from somewhere. So the only way to get supplies was the same way I got clothes, stealing. I didn't like being a thief, but what else could I do? Even if I had money, which I didn't, I could hardly toddle into a supermarket and fill a trolley full of shopping. The staff would go nuts. No, I would have to steal it. It was a short walk to the big Tesco near our house. The day was getting lighter now, and there were more people about, especially when I got close to the main roads, but no one stopped to ask me who I was or why I was outside by myself. Maybe they didn't believe what they were seeing. At the big front doors of Tesco, I hid behind the trolleys until I saw a man on his way in reading a shopping list. As he went into the shop, I toddled along behind him. Anyone watching would have thought he was my dad. Then, as soon as we were a little way inside near the fruits and vegetables, I swerved off and started looking for my own supplies. It was massive, this Tesco. I'm not just saying that because I'm small. I mean, it was a really enormous shop. the kind where you can buy food, but also clothes and bicycles and lawnmowers and tellies and whatever. I knew that what I needed was food to keep me going now that Mum and Dad weren't around to cook for me. The shop wasn't very busy, so I acted fast. I took the bottom of my hoodie into Prayon's orange jeans, zipped it halfway up, and shoved loads of food inside. It's important to have a varied diet, so I stuffed milk chocolate and white chocolate and Smarties and Skittles down there, and topped it off with a box wrapped in plastic called Deluxe Assortment. When I couldn't fit any more supplies down my top, I turned to go and saw someone watching me. It was a boy, about 2 years old. He was staring at me in silence, the way little kids do when they watch someone else being naughty. His tongue was poking out, licking the snot on his top lip back and forth like a windscreen wiper. I slowly backed away just as his mum appeared around the end of the aisle. "Come on, Finn, let's go and find the tea cakes." The boy didn't move. "That girl took the sweeties," he said. That's when the mum noticed me. "Oh, hello, love." She said, "Where's your mummy?" I could see where this conversation was heading and I didn't like it. Best to get out of here as quickly as possible. I turned and ran up to the other end of the aisle. As I ran, my hoodie came untucked from my jeans and 6 bags of sweets skittled out across the floor. I ran all the way back to the shop entrance and tucked in behind a woman with a full trolley on her way out of the car park. I followed the woman just as I had done on the way in. It looked like I got away with it. Wrong. As soon as we stepped outside, the alarms on the doors started flashing and beeping. A man in a shirt and tie stepped out to block the woman's path. He looked at the woman, then looked at me and saw the deluxe assortment of chocolates poking up out of my hoodie. The shirt man spoke to the woman. "Would you and your daughter please step back into the store for a moment?" The woman looked confused. "Daughter?" The man and the woman both looked at me. I threw the box of chocolates at them and made a run for it out towards the car park. But when they saw me running towards the moving cars, they both panicked and ran after me. I felt the man's hands on my shoulders and I was lifted up and carried back into the shop. The man set me down and looked at the woman suspiciously. "You're telling me this girl isn't yours?" "Never seen her before in my life." "Well, whose is she then?" "I don't know, do I? Ask her." The man turned his attention to me. He got down on one knee to be nearer my height and smiled in quite a kind way, although he still kept tight hold of my shoulders. Then he said, "Hello, sweetheart. Where's your mummy?" I said nothing. I did my best impression of a frightened toddler. It's not difficult really, since that's what I was. "My name's Tim," said the man. "I'm a security guard here. Tell you what, let's see if there's some sweeties in my office while we find your mummy and daddy, okay? You come along with me." Forgetting all about the woman, Tim took me by the hand and led me past the checkouts to a door with a keypad on it. He tapped in a number and pushed the door open. I tried to see what the door code was, but it was too high. Tim led me down a corridor to a small office and sat me on the desk. From here, it was going to be harder than ever to escape.
Dun, dun, dun. There we are. Well, thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. Little Horror is out now.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Daniel, for being here with us this evening. And we'll see all of you very soon. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.